Welcome to the Small Giants Fishbowl. This topic is the mechanics of values and culture. Values shape, drive, define, and provide the foundation for the entire culture of your business. Or at least they should. What are the warning signs your culture and values are in misalignment? What should you do to keep the connection between your values and culture strong? Cue Paul Spiegelman, Chief Culture Officer of Stericycle and founder of the Small Giants community, for an intimate conversation about values, the bedrock of great company culture that generates a lasting impact on everyone they touch. Okay, here we go.
Really selling not what we do, but who we are. So we built up our business and were awarded a big contract in the mid-90s to build a large call center for the largest hospital company in the country called HCA. That's what brought us to Texas. So we built a really nice 400-seat center here, commuted back and forth from Los Angeles, ultimately bought it and moved our California operation into this location. So we ended up growing the company to just under 40 million in revenue, about 400 employees, and we serve about 500 hospitals all over the U.S. I'll be honest, designing the business around culture was not part of the plan. We didn't really know until, like I'm sure you guys, when you start your business, you're just trying to survive and figure it out. And yet pretty early on, we realized that what we did was unique, probably came from the values I was given by my own parents and raised us to just, treat people with respect, be nice. But we came to find early on that that's not how business necessarily works or all companies work. And we were smart enough to realize that could not only build a better business, but be our calling card in what we were about. So it's something that really became my personal passion. So like Glenn said, I write and speak a lot about it. That's why I joined with Bo Burlingham to start the Small Giants community, companies that choose to be great instead of big. Just like we're doing today, we want to hang out with each other, people that feel the same way and feel that values drives our businesses, not just the desire to get as big as we can get as fast as we can get there. So as all of you know, we might be kind of kindred spirits in this journey, but there's lots out there that don't get it, don't see the ROI. And I'd like to convince as many of those that I can that creating an environment in which people love what they do is not only the right thing to do, but it's good for business. And so I know I can be working on that for a long time. So back at the end of 2012, I sold my core business, Beryl Health, to a company called Stericycle, which is a company I'd never heard of, but they're a big public company based outside of Chicago. I was able to take on the role of Chief Culture Officer for them. So it's really a unique opportunity for me to hopefully tell the story that the connection between culture and profit transcends size, industry, and geography. And while I can tell a great story about what we did at Beryl, I don't have the credibility yet or the track record to say, I've done it in a big public company that lives by quarterly earnings and all the issues and challenges that go along with that. And I'm happy to share some of what that journey's been about. So I'm having a blast doing the things that I do, and that's kind of my background to bring you up to speed. But would love to just go around and particularly those that we don't know as well, to have you guys introduce yourselves to others on the call. So, Nick, why don't you get us started?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I appreciate hearing, the parts I do know and the parts I need refreshing on about the past. And, my background here at Nick's Pizza and Pub, I think everybody knows, just similar story of getting started, not really focused on specifically about values and purpose and things like that in the culture, but intuitively knowing that I wanted to build a great place to work and wanted to have a great place to work. And probably came a little bit from my grandmother and mother and father and those kind of things, for sure. And then later learning, similar to you, in the restaurant industry, especially, how what I was doing was a little bit unique. So, um, as you shared as well, Paul, it's like, why not? It doesn't have to be unique, So, so that's why, I mean, it's fun, and I become, as I've been out there, after writing my book and been out there speaking a lot, and I come across the resistance in some organizations that are bigger, and they say, "Oh yeah, it only works at Nick's Pizza," and I love having, hearing from you and having this case study about, "Oh no, it doesn't." Here's Paul. Here's what he's doing in this organization. How it's different. So that's what I'm looking forward to in this call, and excited to hear about a couple of things. I mean, I have a couple of questions already just from listening to you that came up. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, great. Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Steele with Red Caffeine. It's sort of, I heard this time last year at Smoking, and I'm too excited to hear about how this starts to take shape in a really big organization. I think that's going to be an interesting journey. But for me, what happened was early last year, I was served with divorce papers from my business partner, and I went through a real. It was a 10-year business, and I went through a real kind of soul searching journey that started after a conversation with Tom Welter. I think a few of you know Tom, and he, made me think about the fact that my values didn't really line up with my partner's values. So in the long term, that it would never be feasible that we could have really, coexisted as partners through this business, and I would never really have the culture that I so desired. And interestingly enough, I had been doing many things, and always liked some of the things that the Small Giants community really foster. I just didn't realize there were so many other companies that share those same beliefs and vision to run their businesses. So as of November 1st, I've been in a new business, Red Caffeine, a 10-year-old startup, as I like to call it, and really kind of getting things off the ground, working on our purpose and core values. And I have to say that doing those efforts along the divide of the business last year with the team that remained with me did help strengthen our, segue from one business to the new business. So we're still a big work in progress, though.
Wow, that's a great story, and I'm sure lots that we can learn from what you're going through as well. Blair.
Yes, thanks so much, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. This is my first experience, and I'm already enjoying it. So this is great. My company is a remote drug delivery company. We manufacture dart and dart rifles for the animal control industry. It was founded in 1967. I acquired the company in '01 with a staff count of 9. We now have 54 and tipping the scales at a 10 million in revenue mark. What's interesting to me is that as we push through that whitewater stage that Les McCullen talks about quite comfortably, how important core values are in keeping us moving forward in the right direction so we can foster the type of processes that will take us into predictable success. And if it hadn't been for experiences with working with Small Giants, Inc. and GrowCo, it's safe to say that we wouldn't be where we're at today as a result of that. And I appreciate this opportunity to further grow and hopefully prosper.
Great to have you. Keith, welcome.
So, hey, thanks for hosting this session again. We do IT consulting, specifically some security type things that deal with identities and passwords and things like that. So we're effectively a consulting business, and we have about bouncing between 20 and 30 employees. And I've been through probably several iterations of attempting to grow our company and kind of get to that next level. Some of the things work, some of them have not, but one thing that has always pretty well held true is our adherence to our core values. We established those really early, and it seems like it makes it so obvious when you've made some type of error in judgment in hiring or chasing a type of business or something. When you get misaligned, it becomes pretty clear pretty quickly that there's some type of values mismatch, because it disrupts everything. People start becoming unhappy, unsettled. People you've hired maybe leave because there wasn't a values match. I mean, it starts to become pretty clear and pretty obvious, and it's not easy. It's quite painful in some ways, but I think what we're really trying to hone in on is how do you get really good at identifying people before they come on board to make sure you don't run into that values mismatch. We're getting better at it, but we haven't cracked the code by any means. But enjoy these sessions and talking to like-minded folks about that type of thing.
Oh, great to have you and see you again. So Paul and Kilton on.
Well, first of all, this is great to be here. One of our 9 values is we appreciate we are part of something bigger than ourselves. And this is a great reminder of that value. We're a very small company. There are 4 of us. You see 50% of the team here. Without knowing you guys existed, this was built on a foundation of philosophy. I am primarily a philosopher and only became an entrepreneur because I wanted to find a way that I could live authentically and I could live being free to be everything that I was born to be. And this has become the purpose of our organization. Something happened yesterday. It's like being a small organization. We've been very lucky that we've got people aligned to our values. And one of the key members of our team, Kevin, is leaving us, which we support because he wants to pursue a career in animation, which is his passion. And there was an immediate reaction to we know we need to go and hire fast. And this is now in contradiction with, hang on, but we need to hire people that are aligned to our values. So great example of we've got our values, now how can we live being true to our values when you're under all this other business pressure of we just need people. So great to work through these business problems with you, and great to connect. So a little bit about how we started. We actually create tools to help organizations reveal their people. We are working with big organizations like Comcast, like Coca-Cola, like Johnson & Johnson, and we believe they're ready to start talking about what is valuable to them, what is valuable to their people. They might not have the core that all of us do, but we feel they're ready to be more purpose-focused and value-driven. So we're excited to be living this ourselves. We're excited to bring these philosophies, the philosophies of small giants, to the big organization.
So, have you already killed things? Yeah, the only thing that I'll add to what Paul has said is that before joining with Paul, I had a company that grew very, very big, very fast. Very big in startup terms is in 6.5 months, my prior venture was already up to 15 full-time people and, on its way to several million in revenue in the first year. Having hired those people quickly and not having our values all set and aligned and clearly stated, it was very easy for someone other than me to hire someone that had nothing to do with the values. It was a complete value mismatch with the company. And that fast growth is what, in the end, made it impossible for the firm to continue. And so having done it that way, one of my prime interests is how does a company that can grow very quickly grow very smart? Keep that culture. Yeah.
That's great. There's such good stories, Glenn. This is wonderful. Is that John that joined us?
Yeah.
You want to introduce yourself to the group?
Small company in Wisconsin, family-owned business. Happy to be here.
Great.
What more can I tell you?
No, that's great. That's good for now. It's just so nice to hear the stories that and all the things that you guys are dealing with. Look, we're all just practitioners, and we learn as we go, and we make mistakes along the way, and we pick ourselves up and do it again. So, I'm interested in kind of diving into some of those stories, but I'll give you some just a few minutes of perspective of why this became so important to me, and how I kind of have boiled it down to the things that I think are really most important. And some of you have heard me talk at Barrel Health, where we coined this term, the circle of growth, as really our core operating philosophy. And it simply says that if we focus first and foremost on our people and drive employee loyalty, that's going to drive customer loyalty. And if we can get our customers to be loyal, that's going to drive profit into our business. And that way we can return that profit back into our people, giving them better tools and resources to do their jobs. And that cycle simply continues. So, I'm far from an academic. I'm not I don't have an MBA or any of that. And actually that whole term came from our first CFO, who had been so cynical about our culture efforts and the money we were spending until a couple years into it, when he realized it was really having a positive impact on our business. And we took what would normally be a commodity business and won many Best Place to Work awards, and we were 5 to 6 times more profitable than our competitors, and had attrition at a fraction of what you'd see in other companies. And I think boiled down what we were able to do into 3 primary areas, because you already know that most of the things that we talk about are very simple and small things. But many leaders will say either I don't believe or I don't have time. And I think, one is, in order for this to be successful in any organization, you do have to have a leader that is genuine in their belief that values drive the business versus financials driving the business. And it also has to be inclusive of the people on the team to actually drive this vision on an ongoing basis. It's particularly hard, and I can talk about what's going on in the public company I'm involved in now to, how do you change a culture midstream? I think I'm probably fortunate, Nick, talking to you and listening to your story, we were kind of always thought this way. It took us a while to maybe turn it into a model for our business, but we're wired this way. Well, not everybody's wired this way. What if they're not? How do we convince them, and how do you change? What's that process to change going forward? But the 3 things that, I think are, number 1, purpose. And that's something that many of you touched on, which is that there's a purpose that we're here beyond just the job. So within that purpose is that set of core values that are those behaviors that no matter what else changes in our business will not change. So, it's one thing to have them, a poster on the wall or a plaque in the lobby, but how do we really define ourselves? And I was quite a cynic years ago about mission, vision, values until one of my mentors talked to me about that and said, you really need a set of behaviors that your folks can attach themselves to. And so this is probably, 15, 16 years ago when we brought in a cross-functional team and went through the whole process of defining those values. And I was so surprised within a couple of weeks how these values would come up in conversations. And we would be in meetings and people would raise one of those values if it related to a customer project, or we might be dealing with an employee issue and someone would say, but wait a minute, what's the right thing to do? And I said, aha, this is actually impacting the decisions that we make every day. And it honestly became almost spiritual in its impact. And so I've become a real disciple around the whole idea that values can drive the business. But it has to be done, it has to be institutionalized in a way that it's consistent over time. And I remember when I first sold my company to Stericycle, and the guy that just became the CEO, I was having a conversation with him, and I said, so can you tell me about, Stericycle's values? And he said, well, he looks around and says, I know they're around here somewhere. He was, going to try to find them. And so it told me right away that, there wasn't a real clear sense of purpose or values that at least had been communicated in that organization. So that's number one. Number two is appreciation. So, and that means people wanting to feel valued. Look, everybody wants to make money. And I know we talk about, maybe millennials or younger folks that want something more, but look, everybody wants to feel that they're making a difference, and it's more than just the money. And I know many of you understand that what makes people tick is just feeling that they're appreciated for the work that they do, and it's recognized. And it can be done in very, very small ways. So that's number two is appreciation. And third is learning. So you can use the acronym PAL, P-A-L. And that's that I believe that 99% of the people that are working in any company, whether it's you guys that have 4 people or those that have larger employee bases, everybody wants to feel like there's an opportunity to learn and to grow personally and in their careers. And what's surprising to me is that there's many companies that have tremendous opportunities to learn and grow, and yet the people within the company don't necessarily feel that and understand that. As another example, with Stericycle, which by the way is about $10 billion company, 15,000 employees in 12 countries, they're very financially successful. I mean, you can look them up on NASDAQ and SRCL, and it's like a hockey stick, their financial results. So it's this fast-growing company that's continues to grow 20% a year. But when we surveyed the employees about a year ago, one of the top things that concerned them was opportunities for growth. And we just thought that was so strange. It's like, you've got to be kidding. I mean, if there's so much opportunity here for growth, but nobody knew it. Nobody knew what the path was to get there. Obviously, the managers weren't spending time training people on how to get there. So saw that as a big issue. So to me, it's those 3 things, purpose, appreciation, and learning, that drive all of the policies that we put in place over time. And just to, before we kind of open it up to questions, I think the one thing that I would say around building a culture and maintaining a culture is that it's not just the feeling you get when you walk in the door. It is a process. It's something to be institutionalized. It's something that you create a recipe and document so that it is sustainable over time. And I always joke that there's probably a lot of processes in my company that could, used a lot more work, but we had this culture thing down so that that next group of leaders or the bench coming in would know from a practical standpoint how to continue some of these programs. Because if you think about it in business, it's really all about trust, right? Our employees need to come to trust us. They need to see it's not the flavor of the month. And you're only going to get that, in my opinion, through consistency and institutionalizing these practices over time and measuring learning, listening, and basically giving your people the opportunity to be themselves, and knowing that that's not a threat to the business, that's going to help your business grow. So I don't want to take up more time with what I've done. I'd love to jump in, Glenn, to some questions, and maybe we can solve a couple of problems here today.
Yeah. So two things here. It seemed like as everybody was kind of giving their introductions, that a lot of folks hit on getting people into the organization as the right people into the organization, people that understand and champion your values, is an issue or something you haven't figured out yet. Would most folks agree with that?
Yep.
Thumbs up, heads up, not? Okay, yes. Paul, can you give us some insights into how Barrel Health approached the values conversation when it goes out into the community and is bringing people in, when it's through the actual onboarding, hiring process?
Yeah, well, and I think, I want to be even really specific about the questions that came up. I mean, you guys, Paul and Kilton said how you got 4 people, you're going to lose one, and you're anxious to replace that person, and most of us, as small companies, when we get the budget to add that next person, we're so excited. We see somebody with a good resume, and we want to put them in a seat and get them going because we need them to be productive. And I think the biggest thing that I would say that we need when hiring is patience, and realize that we have to take the time to hire not only for skill but for fit. So the question becomes, all right, well, how do we hire for fit? And like Heath said, it's not easy to do. It takes time. We have found a couple practices to be the most effective. One would be to do multiple interviews, obviously kind of a 360 approach, where not only are they meeting with whoever's hiring them, but above, below them, peers. I also found is something that to be really good is to have people in different social situations. Take someone to breakfast or dinner. See how that works. And the last thing that we did is, as we get bigger and we do have multiple interviews, it's sometimes you just get in the process of every conversation being the same. So what we do is we divide and conquer, and we say that if that person is going to interview with 6 people, we're only going to have 1 or 2 that really understand the skill requirements, that are going to focus on questions related to skill. And then we're going to have people who are going to ask questions related to culture fit. And then we're going to get together and we're going to talk about it. But to have everyone interview and just say, hey, I look at your resume, tell me your background, is kind of a waste of time. Let's I happen to be a terrible interviewer. I can tell if I like the person, but you don't want me really determining whether that person has the skill to do the job. So I think having patience, multiple interviews, dividing that responsibility. Of course, there's personality assessments, things like that you can do. And then lastly, it's realizing, Keith, to your point, there's no way we're ever going to be batting 1,000%. We're going to make mistakes, and the question then becomes, how quickly are we recognizing the mistake that we've made, to either coach someone or move them out? And to me, that's probably the number one problem we have as leaders. And I've got this going on at Stericycle right now. When there's people that simply don't belong, they're not the right fit. Managers and leaders don't have the courage to make the tough decisions. And then when you finally do, everybody's looking at you and saying, "What took you so long?" So we've got to move, and that's not, that doesn't mean it's a bad culture. It means it's a good culture, because you're willing to make the tough decisions, and everybody's going to rally around that. It's really hard to do the kinds of things that any of us want to do, if we don't have the right team in place. And to me, as leaders, that's really our job. I mean, if you think about what are the problems you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and in my almost 30 years, it's always people issues. It's not, the strategy or how to sell what we're selling. So, to your question, Glenn, about how to engage in the values conversation, I encourage people on both sides. I mean, both the employer to talk about their values and to ask about it. At Barrel Health, our first question was always, how do you define compassion? So we try to probe people to, push them a little bit. But then I'm always looking for people that are being interviewed to ask questions of us about our culture, to talk about values. So to see if that's coming from them is a good sign as well. So I'll stop there, but of course, anybody else chime into that question.
So, Paul, I've got a question. My pattern, my tendency probably has been to try people, maybe even in different roles, give them more chances than they probably need to see if, maybe changing things around will make them fit better. And historically, I think people have jumped off the bus rather than me sort of pushing them off the bus. Can you talk a little bit about timing? When you think you've got a mismatch, you're not exactly sure, you want to give it a little more time. Do you have any rule of thumb on tips and tricks on, how quickly you need to move?
Yeah, that's a great question, Keith, and would love to hear from others. But and this is something that, again, over the years, I've become pretty strong about. And I had a mentor tell me this too, that look, when in your heart, in your gut, and you really do, that this person doesn't belong or will not be with you long term, you owe it to them to act now. And that means immediately. And I again, I don't want to be cynical, but I don't think that there are, and you can tell me how successful it's been, moving people into another role. Like from a skill set perspective, of course, from a growth perspective, but just moving them, we have to ask ourselves, is this convenient? Am I just trying to be nice, give them another chance? Or am I just delaying the inevitable? And so I think that what we sometimes do is we kind of blame that person because, they're not performing or they're not fitting. We need to look in the mirror and realize, we're the one that brought them on. We may not have given them the training necessary. So if you can look in the mirror and say, is there something I can do to make them more successful? It's worth you doing your part first versus worrying about what they do. But at some point, I think you have to make this decision. I would say that it's critical that this never is a surprise to someone. So the typical things, am I having regular one-to-one conversations with people? Of course, an annual evaluation or that, but no one should ever know. This should be topics that are coming up on a regular basis. And I think that waiting for people to self-select out is not necessarily the best course of action. The sooner you move, not only is it better for you and the business, but everyone else is looking at you to your guidance and your leadership. I'd love to hear from others if you guys agree or disagree with that.
Tell a story about what happened in that prior venture that I had mentioned there. One of the co-founders of the company was there when there was 15 full-time and then 5 part-time people. So it's 20 people in the building. And it just came time that I realized, I knew, as you mentioned, in my gut that he was not going to work out long term. And we had tried him in 4 or 5 different roles. And the last, I proposed to other business partners that we need to let him go and or ask him to leave. And the usual response came up, which is, well, we need some help over here. Maybe he'll be better at that. And I said, if that's an open position and you didn't know him already, if he wasn't already in the company, would you hire him for that? All around the table, heavens no. I said, then he needs to go.
Yeah.
It was just reverse the question. If I didn't own him, would I buy him? No.
Yeah.
So that helped.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Nick, I'd love to hear from you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The only thing I would add, everything you said is right on. I don't move anybody. That's why we actually make sure somebody gets certified at we call a mastery level, if they want to go work in a different position in the company. The only thing I would add to it is don't stop interviewing, so that you never feel like you're in that position where you have to bring on a warm body. For us, we have interviews scheduled once a week for the practice for our people who are trained in interviews, our trainers, and to make sure that if there's talent out in the community, we get the talent before the guy down the street does. So for us it works once a week, but I mean for other businesses it might be once a month, whatever it is. But I would make sure put a structure in place where you're interviewing on a consistent basis.
Yeah, always have a bench.
Yep.
Good point. Okay, Glenn, did you have another question?
Actually, I had a little bit of a continuation on this question. John, you're in a family business. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
How does the dynamic of a family business affect the conversation that everyone else is having on bringing the right person in and sending them out? Does that affect you?
A little more background on our company. We've been in business for 40 years. I'm in business with my brother of about 5 years apart. We started the business, and recently I brought a son into our business about 1.5 years ago. And so one of our challenges is turnover and getting the right people in our organization. And we've really struggled with getting frontline people. So being in the milling business, this being a really tough year in Wisconsin, we had some really tough conditions in our environment. We've got a lot of turnover in our front line. We use a hiring team, and so we have peers. So frontline people, frontline supervisors are part of our hiring team, and they're hiring to our core values. We're real clear about our core values. We've got a handout that are on the wall, and they're discussed and talked about frequently in our communications. And so, and even doing that, we're struggling keeping that frontline individual. I mean, these are jobs in the $13 to $18 range. I mean, they're good jobs for the rural setting that we're in. Good paying jobs. I don't know that I guess a long answer, I don't know that the family dynamics change anything, because we really treat all of our people as family. And so I don't see I don't know. I mean, it's the only business that we've been in, and so I don't know what to compare that to know that's any different than what you're experiencing in non-family businesses.
Yeah, I'd actually like to follow up, John, just to ask you, what you have. I mean, Nick and I both have, companies where they're generally higher turnover, even lower paid frontline workers, typically high attrition. So you've got, like you said, a well-paid workforce, and you're dealing with turnover issues. Where do you think, if I were to talk to 5 of your frontline employees today, where do you think the issues are, or do you have a sense today around that turnover?
No, we don't have a very good sense for that. We're really trying to drive the decision making to the front line, and so we're really engaging. We really believe that we're engaging our frontline employees. A number of cross-sectional groups that are involved in our process. most of our turnover is probably in the first 3 months. And we'll lose some people that have been with us for 3 years. So, a good example, our hiring team interviewed over 70 people. We've job fairs. We hired, I think, 11 or 12, and experienced in that a 25% turnover rate. So I think that they're being selective, and they're really getting people that they want on the team and that match our core values. And still we're seeing this turnover, and we're spending a lot of time trying to figure that out, and don't have an answer for you.
Do you do exit interviews?
Yes.
Okay. Do you do them? Or
Yes, we do.
Do them?
We've got a person that heads up our human development group that does do the interviews. We've lost people for closer jobs to home, higher pay. And in some cases, we don't do exit interviews because we don't see them. We're trying to gather as much information as we can doing exit interviews.
Yeah, I think one of the things that it reminded me of when you talked about your high level of turnover in that first 3 months, we used to have that a few times at Barrow Health over the years, and I think what we boiled it down to is that we weren't spending enough time sharing with the new employees exactly what they were getting themselves into, right? Like, what is the job? What's to be expected? What your day is going to be like? And be really open and honest about that, because in our example, we run a healthcare call center. You're taking 80 to 90 calls a day from moms that are concerned about the health of their kids or whatever it is. It's a tough job, and I think that sometimes we would just stand behind the fact that we just had this great culture and come on in, and not really be completely transparent about the job. And then people would come in and at a month or 6 weeks and go, oh my gosh, I never really realized what this was. So I'm not saying that that's happening there, but that's one of the things we found when we had, kind of early stage turnover like that.
Okay, well that's it for this one. Check out more Fishbowls exclusively for the Small Giants community at smallgiants.org.